We get started on the Dharma talk. Please join me in invoking the Buddha's name 3 times. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni. Good afternoon, Venerable Abbot and Venerable Sangha. It's just me today. I've convinced our Venerable Abbot to rest. I should be resting too. I fell down the stairs yesterday. I was cleaning outside. I cleaned the temple yesterday. I was cleaning outside the tiles using horse water. I slipped. And I have a bowl-sized bruise on my shoulder. So, hopefully my Motak skills today will be sufficient. All right, so we're on chapter 26 of the Lotus Sutra, chapter titled Dharani. This is one of my least favorite chapters of the Lotus Sutra. I don't want to say least favorite because I don't have a least favorite of anything, but it is one of those chapters that doesn't really have a connection to us in this modern day. And the reason for that is we have to remember the time frame of when these sutras were in development, right? So during the Buddha's time, when Hinduism was still the prominent religion, the use of mantras and dharanis were quite popular, right? They were quite extensive. And so every rite and ritual and ceremony in Hindu practice involves mantras and dharanis. And so that kind of mindset and the belief in the power of mantras and dharanis was implemented, kind of migrated into Buddhism and migrated into the Lotus Sutra. And so unlike most of the chapters in the sutra, where each chapter is a parable or a skillful means or a story that encourages its practitioners and the readers to do something. This chapter, on the other hand, like some of the previous chapters, where it's merely a chapter of dedication and a chapter of merit building, I suppose. And so this chapter 26 of Dharani is pretty much the same thing. So before I go into the chapter itself, I just want to explain or give a quick summary of what a dharani is, right? And so we all know the word mantra, right? So mantra is a Sanskrit word, and the root man means I'm having a brain fart here. Mind, thank you. Man means mind, and tra is tool. And so mantra means a tool of the mind or tool for the mind. And dharani is the root dharan means to uphold or to hold, or to have total retention. So dharani is just a longer version of a mantra. A mantra is typically short phrases or a few syllables, or a couple passages, whereas a dharani is a much longer version of a mantra. And so we don't chant it when we chant the Lotus Sutra, but when we chant the Great Compassion mantra, which is technically called the Great Compassion Dharani, is a dharani, right? And when we chant for the morning chanting, when we chant the Shurangama Sutra, it has also the 5 mantras, the 5 dharanis. And so that's pretty much the main difference. Both mantras and dharanis hold the Sanskrit, right, terminology and verses. However, there are quite a many mantras and dharanis that don't exactly have an actual meaning toward them, right? Mantras and dharanis are usually, at least from the Buddhist perspective, dharanis are usually either words or sounds exclaimed by Buddhas or Bodhisattvas who emerge from samadhi, right? Samadhi, the deep concentrated mind, meditative mind. And so anything they speak within the samadhi, whether it's actual words or sounds even, becomes or can become a dharani. And so in this chapter, dharani, there are 4 groups of people that come up to the Buddha and tell the Buddha that we will do our best to help maintain and contain Buddhism and spread it and protect the practitioners. And so the first bodhisattva that comes in and says, I have a dharani to offer, is Medicine King Bodhisattva. And the dharani that he exclaims is meant to protect and ensure that the practitioners are free from harm and obstacles. The second person that provides the dharani is Bodhisattva Brave Donor, or Courageous Giver. His dharani protects practitioners from spirits, demons, and malevolent beings. The third group are the 4 heavenly kings, and their dharanis protect those who uphold the Lotus Sutra, ensure that its teaching spread without any hindrance. And the 4th group are the daughters of the Rakshasa demons, and their dharani protects those who read, recite, accept, and uphold the Lotus Sutra and spare them from any decline or harm. And so it's a pretty short chapter, and the objective of this chapter is to remind its practitioners to, again, to uphold and maintain the sutra, the Lotus Sutra, and to maintain and uphold their practice, and to remind the practitioner of their faith, right? To have faith in the Dharma. And so, unlike mantras that are short and sweet and simple, dharanis are also kind of considered the summarization of specific teachings or sutras as well. And so we also can include, or we can also include the Heart Sutra, the Prajnaparamita Sutra. Even though we call it a sutra, it's technically a dharani, right? Because these are the words that were spoken by Avalokiteshvara when they emerged from samadhi. So we consider it a dharani. And at the end of the dharani, there's actually an actual mantra, which is the Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Swaha. That's the mantra of the dharani. Even the Great Compassion dharani, as long as it is, the very last part of it, which is also called the heart mantra of the Great Compassion dharani, is Sadhyanto Madrapadaya Swaha. That's the mantra of the Compassion dharani. So there are many of these throughout all the different sutras, right? And so anytime there's a dharani with a mantra at the end, the mantra is kind of the summarization of the dharani, and the dharani is the summarization of the sutra, the teaching that it's representing. So there are different steps or avenues of sutras, dharanis, and mantras. We know mantras, we use mantras specifically for meditative practices, right, where we use a mantra to focus the mind and invoke any of the energies of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Whereas a dharani, again, is specifically geared toward protection, preserving the essence that contain within the teachings of the sutras or specific specific teachings or sutras. So for instance, like yesterday during our meditation class, we used the mantra of Amitabha, right, during our meditation. And we, from everyone that was here, they've all concluded, I guess, the effect the positive effect that that mantra had during the meditation, right? Whomever was here, do you want to share your experience? That way I'm not just talking. I'm going to tag you, Michelle.
Just the experience from chanting.
Correct. Correct.
The physical feelings, sensations. Well, I felt like I was levitating, but I was high off the ground. My body was completely buzzing, and I just felt an immense amount of joy and bliss that permeated like my entire being, and it continued for quite some time after I went.
Beautiful. Sir, you want to chime in?
I mean, I think if I put it into words, that would, like, kind of...
It won't make sense.
It won't make it. Like, this is nice. That was
Joy and bliss, okay. Max.
I was more like an awareness. I just felt very aware of this thing. Like what I mentioned, like if I'm in a pool, I'm underwater, I can feel the water currents. I can feel like air currents.
Okay. So awareness, joy, and bliss are the three key words. So that in itself shows just the power and the effects of a mantra can have on us or on our practice, right? And so in this case, the mantra was simply Amitabha. That's all we chanted over and over again for a couple of thousand times, I'm gonna guess. And we can see after we've stopped the chanting, right? Because the way that we do chanting meditation here is we do walking meditation first, and we chant Amitabha slowly, and then we sit down and we kind of speed up the pace before we slow back down and stop. And so when we're doing that and we stop, there's this hum, there's this buzz, there's this vibration in the body, there's a sense of joy and bliss, right? A total awareness of what is happening within the body and the mind. And I think one of the other things we've all kind of concluded as well was the state of contentness that the mind had, right? The mind was pretty steady, for me, right? It was pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Serene, right? It was nice and serene, and it was quiet for the most part. And so there are some very noticeable effects that mantras can have, right? And so we use those mantras, so those are tools that we can use within our practice, especially during our meditation practice, right? As I mentioned yesterday, one of the reasons why mantras work during meditation is because it's a verbal embodiment of the practice, right? And so when we verbalize these mantras, we're using that sense organ of the mouth and speech. And then we hear the mantra, so we're using this sense of hearing, and then the mind kind of does its thing. And so there's a lot of things happening when we're chanting mantras that help us really focus and hone our concentration. Because that's essentially the goal of the mantra, is to have that sense of concentration, a really deep hold of concentration and focus. And so mantras have that pretty positive effect. Dharanis, on the other hand, can also be used during meditation. However, as I mentioned, the point of a dharani is really just to summarize a teaching, a specific teaching, or a practice, or a sutra. And so when we chant a dharani, it's supposed to, the same way that we invoke the Buddhas or the Bodhisattvas, right? When we invoke the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, we're not asking them to come here and to bless us and to give us fame and fortune and wealth and health, right? They don't care about that. We don't care about that. The reason why we invoke the names of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is because we are trying to develop the characteristics of that Bodhi and Bodhisattva within ourselves, and to use those characteristics in order to help us and to help all other sentient beings. So the dharani, it works kind of the same way. So depending on the type of dharani or what dharani you're chanting, it is going to, the effect of a dharani is to help you recollect that teaching, right? Whether it's a summary of a sutra or of a specific teaching or a practice or whatever it may be, right? The same way we invoke the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas' names to develop their characteristics within ourselves, a dharani is to help us develop the characteristics and the aspirations of the sutra or the teaching that it is connected to. The one thing that I do not like about some of the translations of this chapter, in most of translations, the word dharani is translated as magic spell, which I do not like. So unfortunately, the English translation that I've used to create this abridged version of the sutras that we're chanting is by what is his name? Do you remember the author's name of the Lotus Sutra version that we use? Can't recollect. It'll come to me like as we're chanting. But anyway, his version, his translation is probably my favorite translation of the 6 translations that I've read so far. However, the majority of modern translations are translated from Chinese, right? And so Chinese translated their version from Sanskrit. But the Chinese use the word dharani from the context of the word, how the word dharani was used in that time frame, right? And so in India, back at the time, when they used the word dharani, it really did mean as if like a magic spell, right? Because people would come to the Brahmins who conducted these ceremonies and dharanis and rituals and whatnot, and they used these dharanis as almost like a spell form, right? And so because of that type of usage of the word, when the Chinese translated dharani, they translated with that context. However, from a Buddhist perspective, that context is incorrect. And so the majority of modern translations that used that Chinese version are also translating the word dharani into magic spell, which is incorrect. So, the other reason why most translations use that word too is, and this is something that I've stopped doing myself. So usually whenever I create chant books or create any chanting that we use, I always attempt to retranslate them myself using different sources, right? Using multiple sources. So that way when we do chant it or try to read it or study it, it makes the most sense and it flows pretty easily. So when I was working on this abridged version of our sutra, in the not original, but in the translated sutra that we use has the word dharani as translated into spell. So what I did in my version, I've changed the word into mantra, which is what it's actually supposed to say. So in some of those resources I was able to find that was in Sanskrit, right? We don't have a full version, unfortunately, of Lotus Sutra in Sanskrit anymore, but the bits and pieces that still do exist and use the word dharani in the context that it's currently in Sanskrit, I thought the word mantra was much better usage than the word magic spell. So I've changed that. Because I feel like if we're using the word magic spell, it's just going to create some false ideologies of Buddhism that don't exist, right? There's no magic in Buddhism. So it makes zero sense to have a word translated that has nothing to do with Buddhism. So I changed it back to mantra as it should for the benefit of our correct understanding. That's pretty much it. Again, this is a short chapter. So there's really not much to it. The reason, so kind of going back, so in the previous chapter of 20, actually it was in chapter 23, if I remember correctly, where is that 23 or 22? In whatever chapter that the Bodhisattva Medicine King appeared and kind of made his vow to propagate the Dharma and to protect the practitioners of the Dharma. And he kind of made that vow, and then not all, but some other bodhisattvas in the assembly also made those same vows to protect the Dharma and spread it, and to protect those that uphold, read, and recite the Dharma, the Lotus Sutra. And so in this chapter, these other groups kind of followed suit. And so the first one that came up and offered his way of protection was Medicine King Bodhisattva. And he proclaimed a Dharani. I didn't include all the Dharanis in our abridged version because some of them are really long, and even I have a very hard time to pronounce them. Because again, these are just, they're not exactly random words, but they're just, a lot of the words in these Dharanis don't actually have a translation, right? A Dharani is a very esoteric practice, right? It's mostly used in ritual and ceremony, and it doesn't really have any, I don't want to say benefit, because it does have benefit, but it doesn't have any real direct influence on your practice unless you know where the Dharani came from and what the Dharani is representing, right? And so in this instance, at least in this sutra, we know those specifics, right? We know the specifics of why the Dharani was pronounced. And it's to, again, to help protect the practitioners and to protect them as they read, recite, copy, and uphold the sutra. And so again, in this case, Medicine King made a vow and gave a Dharani. Bodhisattva, brave donor or courageous giver, I think, in the sutra, gave a Dharani. The four heavenly kings gave a Dharanis, 2 Dharanis. And the daughters of the Rakshasas also gave a Dharani. And I don't remember how many I've included in our version. I think there's only 3 maybe. I think the very first Dharani from Medicine King is one I omitted because that one was really, really long. And I believe the one from Courageous Giver is in there, I think. And then the Heavenly Kings one is pretty short, and then the Daughters of the Rakshasas were pretty short. So I kept those in. There is also a Dharani from Samantabhadra, from oh man, what's Samantabhadra's English name? Great Conduct Bodhisattva. So in chapter 28, the last chapter of the Lotus Sutra, Samantabhadra also comes in and also provides a Dharani. I don't think I included it in our version because that one was also pretty long. But again, these Dharanis, all these Dharanis were to protect us, right, from whatever ailments the bodhisattvas or the beings provided. And it's not necessary to memorize these Dharanis, but again, to memorize any Dharani is to recollect the practices or the teachings of the sutra that the Dharani is from. And so when we chant the Great Compassion Dharani, for instance, it's referencing the Mahakaruna Dharani Sutra, the Great Compassion Dharani Sutra, from Avalokiteshvara. The Harta Prajna Paramita Sutra, the Heart Sutra, is derived from the Prajna Paramita volume of sutras, right? The Harta Prajna Paramita Sutra that we chant almost all the time is the summary of all the Prajna Paramita Sutras, and there's 6,000 of them, right? And so the heart of Prajnaparamita, that sutra that we chant, is the Dharani, right? So that's the summary of the Prajnaparamita sutras. And then the mantra at the end of the Dharani, Gati Gati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhiswa, is the summary of the sutra, the small sutra, the heart sutra, Dharani. So when we memorize and recite the heart of Prajnaparamita Sutra, right, that is the summarization of all 6,000 Prajnaparamita volumes of sutras. And so it is said that if we memorize and uphold and realize the just become realized, enlightened to a point, I guess, from the Heart Sutra, means that we've accomplished practicing all 6,000 volumes of the Prajnaparamita Sutras. And when we invoke when we chant the Heart, Great Compassion Dharani, we memorize it and we realize it, we also realize the sutra that comes from, the Great Compassion Dharani Sutra. And so it's a easier way, I guess, can be an easier way to realize huge sutras or volumes of sutras in a smaller version. But that's why we have dharanis. That's why we have mantras. It's to summarize and to help really just narrow our practice. Because again, the Buddhist sutras are vast. We have hundreds of thousands of sutras. So it's impossible to try to go through each one in one lifetime. It's even more impossible to try to realize every single one and become, have a realization from them or have some sort of aha, enlightened moment from them. So it's very difficult to try to do that in one lifetime. And so to help bridge that gap that we are not able to get to every single 100,000 sutras is by creating dharanis or heart sutras. When I say heart sutras, I'm not necessarily referencing the heart of Prajnaparamita Sutra, right? Because usually a lot of the larger volumes or collection of sutras like the Prajnaparamita is vast. It's the largest collection of sutras that we have in Mahayana Buddhism. There's 6,000 to 8,000 volumes of Prajnaparamita Sutras, right? These are perfect wisdom sutras. And so we have to have a way to summarize what all those 6,000 to 8,000 teachings are saying. And so then Avalokiteshvara came and aligned us with their great heart of Prajnaparamita Sutra. And so the word heart here, Hridaya in Sanskrit, means heart, but it means like the summary, right? What is the heart of the teachings? What is at its core, right? And so Avalokiteshvara came and created the heart of Prajnaparamita Sutra, saying that this, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, right? This is the heart of all 6,000 Prajnaparamita Sutras. And so there's hearts of other sutras, like the Shurangama Sutra, that is ginormous. The Shurangama Sutra is literally like this big. It's huge. And so the summary kind of that is what we chant in the morning. The 5 dharanis, the 5 Shurangama mantras, and the 10 smaller mantras. That is the heart of the Shurangama Sutra. And so many other larger sutras kind of, not all of them, there are very few, but there are a few others that kind of follow that same procedure. The other thing that I want to include is when we read this chapter, if you go and read the full chapter, right, because again, this is the abridged version that we have. If you read the full chapter, it'll say time and time again that these dharanis are here to protect us, right? And to protect us from all these different ailments, right? So Medicine King, his dharani protects us from obstacles and harm. Bodhisattva Brave Donor protects us from spirits, demons, and malevolent beings. The Heavenly King's Dharani protects us from, or helps protect those that uphold the sutra, and the Rakshasa daughters Dharani is to help or protect those that read, recite, and uphold the Lotus Sutra and help them from decline or harm. When we mention protection here, this doesn't mean necessarily a physical protection. Like if you read these dharanis and chant them and memorize them, it doesn't mean that these groups of beings that say we'll protect you will come and appear to you, right? Because again, if you go back and recollect what mantra means, right? It means mind protection, right? Or a tool for the mind. These dharanis, their protective powers are to protect the mind from wandering. So again, what does a mantra do? It helps us focus and concentrate on our meditation object of meditation, which is the mantra itself. And so the dharanis do the same thing. Their protection isn't, it can be physical or spiritual or mental, right? But they still follow the same reasoning of why a mantra works. Protect the mind. And so dharani is memorized and chanted to also protect the mind. Otherwise, if you're sitting and just chanting, you could also be daydreaming. You can be thinking about lunch. You can be thinking what you need to do today. You can be thinking about work or school tomorrow, right? And so you have a lot of things happening. You're getting too distracted. But a mantra and dharani helps that distraction not be formed. So just think about yesterday's meditation, right? When we're chanting Amitabha, especially when we start to speed up, because we're doing a lot of things, and one of those things is we're trying to keep up with the pace of the chant, and we're trying to be in sync with the whole group. And so there's very little room for the mind to wander, right? Because it's already distracted enough to try to keep up with the mantra, that it has no room to wander often, right? And so the dharanis work the same way. Or any mantra, or any dharani works the same way. It's to help the mind stay focused, help the mind stay concentrated and in the present, and not wander. Right? That is the protective power of mantras and dharanis. Okay, I'm going to stop talking. Questions, concerns, emotional outbursts about this chapter? Yes, sir. Yes, Bert Watson. There we go. See, I knew it was going to come to us. So that translator, Bert Watson, is probably my favorite version of all the translations that I've read. I'm fairly certain I've read all prominent ones. I believe I've read 6 or 7 different translations. The other thing that I stopped doing was a lot of the really early translations of sutras back in the late 1800s or early 1900s. These were translations made by linguists and not actual Buddhist practitioners. And so that becomes a problem because without the background knowledge of Buddhism and Buddhist terminology and Buddhist cosmology and all the little nits and pieces of Buddhism, it's very difficult to actually translate a Buddhist text correctly that actually holds true to what the teaching is, right? Because they're linguists, they're trying to use a one-for-one translation, right? This word in Sanskrit means this, I'm going to translate it exactly as it is in English, and so on and so forth. But that's not always the correct case, right? And so we know that Buddhism is prominent for its similes and parables, right? And so it's using phrases that don't mean what we read on a very superficial level. And so those translations they're not very helpful, right? They're just a direct translation, which isn't always a good thing. And so in recent years, I've attempted to only read translations by actual authors that are practitioners because they have a much more vast knowledge and understanding of the Dharma in order to actually translate it correctly. And it becomes much more meaningful to the readers. And so that's one thing I would encourage everyone to take account in, is when you are reading a translated version of a sutra or a deep teaching, you also want to research the author itself too. You want to see what their experience is, what their qualifications are, what their expertise is in. Because if they're non-practitioners, then it's just going to be a raw translation. It's honestly not going to be very helpful. Yeah. Yes.
I noticed in the sutras that the Buddha was really teaching in a lot of detail, and the general formats, and there he would present it again in verse form.
Mm-hmm.
So is that kind of like going for what we're talking about here, saying, okay, I've given you this great teaching, let me tell you again as simply in simple words as possible.
So,
it's not quite the same, but it's
right. So, we have to also remember the main methodology in Buddhism is skillful means, right? And so, actually, in the original sutras, the verse form is what is actually the original. And then anything prior to that, the prose was actually added later on to add more detail. And so the verses are actually, exactly. So the verses are the OG, and then the prose was added later on to add more context and more meaning to the verses.
And only people who were close to that original Buddha could have added that.
Correct. So, the Lotus Sutra, I can't recall the dates. The Lotus Sutra, I believe, was I think it was completing its final version about 60 years after the Buddha's passing. And so it was, at that point, it was, I think, they were in the third or fourth generation of direct disciples from the Buddha. And so it gives us a kind of an ease to knowing that it was close enough to the Buddha's time where we can confidently say that this is true and correct. Versus some other later sutras that are or can be considered apocryphal. I can't remember the name, but not real, and that's basically the meaning of it. Unoriginal. And some spectate that the Shurangama Sutra is one of those sutras, because it was created later on in time, and it doesn't really follow suit too much to some of the earlier sutras. So there's some debate about that. Anyway, any other questions? Yes.
I'm not sure how to phrase this question, but I have seen that a lot of the stuff that I read is more metaphorical than it is actual. But then, I guess going back to the previous chapter about the perceiver of sounds, there's like a whole list of, I guess, bad things that can happen to you, that specifically, suppose you're on the peak and Mount so-and-so pushes you off, kind of tired up the spirit of sound, walking in there like the sun. Is that more of a translation, or is that more, I guess, actual?
Go for it. Yeah, go.
So, you have a state of meditation, and somebody comes along and tries to interrupt that at some point. I think it's just a metaphor for a really strong method of concentration. On top of a mountain, they come and knock the mountain out. But they think is supporting you, and there is no mountain, it's just your concentration.
Okay. That's the way that I think about things, is more like situational. I see that. We talk about like a ground sea, all these that's the way that I can see it. But then now the second part of my question is, now we have the mantras and Quran is with the perceiver of the sounds, you're more calling off to them. So another, I guess, how does that work with protections? How does that work to the context?
So to answer the first part of your question, Leon answered it pretty accurately, right? And so when you're hanging in midair like the sun, we literally just talked about that. What was the effects of yesterday's meditation? Were you not feeling like you're floating there like the mid-sun? That means your concentration is so strong that outside influences are not strong enough to influence or break that concentration. And in another verse, we're saying, pushing to a pit of fire. Well, what does fire represent in a normal sense? Anger. It represents anger, right? We're heated up, we're fired up, we become red when we're angry. You're like fire. And so the fire represents our anger, and I don't forget what the phrase is, to get out of the fire, but that represents the antidote of how we can extinguish that fire, extinguish that anger within us. So yeah, these are all metaphors, but they're meaning something specific, right? They all connect to something very specific. But it's presented in this way to kind of think outside the box. The Lotus Sutra is not one of those sutras where you can just pick it. If you're brand new to Buddhism, the Lotus Sutra is not the sutra you want to pick up and read first. And I say that with extreme carefulness, because the Lotus Sutra, as beautiful and as grand and as fully encompassing as it is, it requires a lot of background knowledge first of Buddhism and Buddhist practices, because it's mentioning a lot of those practices. It mentions the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the links of dependent origination. It talks about the perfections and the what else? The Brahma Viharas, the Four Immeasurables. So it's talking about all these different teachings that you would have no idea about what they're talking about if this is your first time reading anything Buddhist related. So it makes zero sense, because if you read it superficially without any background knowledge, it's going to read like a mythical, not fictional book. This is cool, some cool sci-fi. There's a whole bunch of dragons and demons and divine beings, right? It reads like a storybook. And so it would make no sense to anybody. So it's extremely beneficial to have some background knowledge and knowing what some of these terminologies mean, because most of these terminologies of Avalokiteshvara's representations are also mentioned elsewhere, right? And so this isn't the first time it's being mentioned. This isn't the first time people know Avalokiteshvara and their abilities. And so without knowing that, we read all those lists and be like, this doesn't make any sense, right? Because in other sutras or in other texts where it's mentioned, it's not mentioned in the same way. It's not mentioning about getting pushed off a mountain. It's not mentioned being pushed into a fire pit. It's not mentioned being attacked by sea creatures, right? So it's mentioned here in this way to help us be in the mindset of different situations that we would be in that would help us by reciting Avalokiteshvara's name. So it's mentioning here, reciting Avalokiteshvara's name to get out of these situations. Reciting Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva is the mantra. What does the mantra do? Protects the mind, protects you from distractions. And so if someone does push you into a pit of fire, if you chant her name, his name, then your concentration will remain strong and you'll be floating in midair like the sun. Make sense? Okay.
But it's not you're actually calling on them, you're not calling on the qualities.
Correct. Even when we're invoking bodhisattvas and Buddha's names, we're not actually calling them forth, right? They're gone. We're insignificant. We're a grain of sand in the multitude of the cosmos. We're not significant enough. I don't want to say that because that's blasphemous for some Buddhists, but again, just the same way we invoke their names, we're invoking the characteristics of that Buddha and Bodhisattva. What are the characteristics of Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara? Great compassion, fearlessness, deep listening, deep concentration. So all these qualities that the Bodhisattva have, we need to invoke within ourselves in these difficult situations. Good question. Any other questions before we go into chanting? I think today's chanting is the Denying, I think. Maybe. I don't know. What tab is the Denying chapter in? Oh, we're on 7 today, I think. Right? I lose count. But I think we're doing tab 7 today, right? I think so, if I remember correctly. Okay. No questions? Concerns? Sure.
We've got all those chanting chapters that Don talked about.
We do not.
I just kind of hit me.
We do not. I am following suit of how we do in the Vietnamese services, so I'm going to stick to that. It makes more sense. Okay. Well, then now we will transfer the merit, then we'll go to chanting. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha Namo Shakyamuni Buddha Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. For any positive karmic action we've accumulated here today, we wish to transfer the merit to all sentient beings and wish them full enlightenment. Namo Buddhaya. The incense in the censer now is burning, all the Dharma realm in every place, auspicious clouds appearing, our sincere intention thus fulfilling, as all Buddhas now show their perfect body. Homage to the incense cloud canopy, Bodhisattva and great Bodhisattva. In gratitude we offer this incense to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas throughout space and time. May it be print as earth herself, reflecting our careful efforts, our wholehearted mindful, and the fruit of understanding slowly ripening. May we and all beings be companions of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. May we awaken from forgetfulness and realize our true home. Homage to the eternally abiding Buddhas, the supreme Dharma and sagely Sangha throughout the Dharma and the realm of empty space and 3 periods of time. Homage to the honored future Buddha, Manjushri, great wisdom, Bodhisattva, universal great conduct, Bodhisattva, all Dharma guarding Deva, Bodhisattva, and the glorious mountain assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Homechu Amitabha Buddha in the land of ultimate bliss, Avalokiteshvara, great compassion, Bodhisattva, great strength, Bodhisattva, earth store, great vow, Bodhisattva, and the assembly of great pure sea like Bodhisattvas. Please sit down. The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in hundreds of millions of years. I now see and hear and receive and uphold it, and I vow to fathom the Tathagata's Moni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. A pilgrim briefly in this world, I am grateful and joyful to hear the Lotus Sutra. How hard to be born a human egg, but I might hope to hear once more the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha, the son of Maitreya. The long night's darkness in between, the Lotus Sutra sheds its light. Whoever copies it, reads it, lives it, they say will be called the fivefold Dharma with his 6 rules cleansed in the end. He who chants the Lotus Sutra is guarded by a heavenly host. He wanders the world without fear like a lion king. Namo Sadharma Pundarika Sutra. Namo Sadharma Pundarika Sutra. Namo Sadharma Pundarika Sutra. Let's go to tab 7, page 126. Namo Lotus Assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Namo Lotus Assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Namo Lotus Assembly of Buddhas Sutra of the Lotus of the Wonderful Law, Chapter 23, the former affairs of the Bodhisattva, Medicine King at the time, Bodhisattva, Consolation King, Flower, Buddha saying, world honored one, how does the Bodhisattva Medicine King come and go in the Saha world, world honored one? This Bodhisattva Medicine King has carried out some hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, millions of nayutas of difficult practices, arju practices very well, world honored one. Could I ask you to explain a little the heavenly beings, dragons, gods, yakshas, gandharvas, asuras, garudas, kimnadas, mahuras, human and non-human beings, and the bodhisattvas who have come from other lands, and the multitude of voice hearers will all be delighted. At the time the Buddha addressed the Bodhisattva Consolation King, Flower, saying, many kalpas in the past, immeasurable as Genji sands, there was a Buddha named Sun Moon, pure bright virtue, thus come, worthy of offerings of right and universal knowledge, perfect clarity and conduct, well gone understanding, though unexcelled, worthy trainer of people, teacher of heavenly and human beings, Buddha, world honored one. This Buddha had 80 million great bodhisattvas and mahasattvas, and a multitude of great, equal to the sense of 72 Ganges. This Buddha's lifespan was 42,000 kalpas, and the lifespan of bodhisattvas was the same in his lap. There were no distinction of genders, hell dwellers, hungry spirits, beasts, or asuras, and no kinds of suffer. The ground was as the palm of a hand, made of lapis lazuli, and adorned with jewel trees, jewel curtains covered it over, banners of jewel flowers hung down, and jeweled urns and incense burners filled the land. There were platforms made of the 7 treasures with a tree. The tree situated an arrow shot length from the platform. These jewel trees all had bodhisattvas and voice hearers sitting under, and each of the jewel platforms had hundreds of millions of heavenly beings playing on heavenly instruments. Offering at the time for the sake of the Bodhisattva, gladly seen by all living beings, and the other numerous Bodhisattvas and multitude of voice hearers, the Buddha preached the Lotus Sutra. This Bodhisattva, gladly seen by all living beings, delighted in carrying out difficult practices in the midst of the preached by the Buddha, Sun Moon, pure bright virtue. He applied himself diligently and traveled about here and there, single-mindedly seeking Buddha for a period of fully 12,000 years. After that, he was able to gain the samadhi in which can best all physical forms. Having gained this samadhi, his heart was filled with great joy, and he taught to himself, my gaining the samadhi in which I can manifest all physical forms is due entirely to the that I heard the Lotus Sutra. I must now make an offering to the Buddha, Sun Moon, bright virtue, and to the Lotus Sutra. Immediately he entered the samadhi, and in the midst the sky rained down mandarava flowers, gray mandarava flower, and finally ground hard black particles of sandalwood. They filled the whole sky like clouds as they came raining. He also rained down the incense of the sandalwood that grows by the southern seashore. 6 taels of this incense is worth as much as the sahab. All these he used as an offering to the Buddha. When he had finished making this offering, he rose from his samadhi and thought to himself, though I have employed my supernatural powers to make this offering to the Buddha, it is not as good as making an offering of my own body. Thereupon he swallowed various perfumes, sandalwood, kundaro, roshoka, pirka, aloes, and ambergum, and he also drank the fragrant oil of champaka and other kinds of flowers. Doing this for a period of fully 1200 years, anointing his body with the fragrant oil, he appeared before the Buddha. Sun, moon, bright, pure virtue wrapped his body in thinly jeweled rose, poured fragrant oil over his head, and calling on his transcendental power said, glow shone forth, illuminating worlds equal in number to the sands of 80 million Ganges. The Buddha in these worlds simultaneously spoke out in praise, saying, excellent, excellent, good man, this is true diligence. This is what is called a true Dharma offering to the thus come one. The one may use flowers, incense, necklaces, incense for burnt, powdered incense, space incense, heavenly silken banners and canopies, along with the incense of the sandalwood that grows by the southern sea, presenting offerings of all such things as these. He can never match this. The one made donations of his realm and cities, his wife and children. He is no match for this good man. This is called the foremost donation of among all donations. This is most. One is offering the Dharma to the thus come one. After they had spoken these words of the Bodhisattva, burned for 1200 years, and when the period of time had passed, it last burned itself out. After the Bodhisattva, gladly seen by all living beings, had made this Dharma offering, and his life had come to an end. He was reborn in the land of the Buddha. Sun, moon, pure, bright virtue in the household of King Pure Virtue, sitting in cross-leg position. He was suddenly born by transformation, and at once for the benefit of his father, he spoke in verse form, saying, great king, you should now understand this. Having walked about in certain place, I immediately gained the samadhi that allows me to manifest all physical forms. I have carried out my endeavors with great diligence and cast aside that I loved. When he had recited this verse, he said to his father, the Buddha, sun, moon, pure, bright virtue is still present at this time. Previously I made an offering to this Buddha, Hangeta Dharani, that allows me to understand the words of all living beings. Moreover, I have heard this Lotus Sutra with its 100,000, 10,000 millions of Nayutas, Kankaras, Vivadas, Akshobhyas of verses. Great king, I must now once more make an offering. Having said this, he seated himself on a platform made of the 7 treasures, rose up into the air to the height of 7 tala trees, and proceeding to the place Buddha was, bowed his head to the ground in observance to the Buddha's feet, put the nails of his 10 fingers together, and spoke this verse in praise of the Buddha. The countenance so rare and wonderful, its brilliant beams illuminating the 10 direct. At a time I made an offering, and now once more I draw near at the time after the Bodhisattva, gladly seen by all spoken this word to the Buddha. World honored one, is the world honored one still present in the world at the time? The sun, moon, pure, bright virtue said to the Bodhisattva, gladly seen by all living beings. Good man, the time has come for my nirvana. The time has come for extinction. You may provide me with a comfortable bed, for tonight will be my pot in nirvana. He also commended the Bodhisattva, gladly seen by all living beings, saying, good man, I take this law of the Buddha entrusted to you. In addition, the Bodhisattvas and great disciples, along with the law of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi and the 1,000,000,000-fold world, heavenly beings who wait on, attend them. All these I hand over to you. I also entrust you the relics of my body that remain after I have passed into extinction. You must distribute them abroad and arrange for offerings to them far and wide. You should erect many thousands of towers to house them. The Buddha, sun, moon, pure, bright virtue, having given these commands to the Bodhisattva, gladly sing living beings that night. In the last watch of the night entered nirvana. Chapter 24. The Bodhisattva, wonderful sound at the time. Shakyamuni Buddha emitted a beam of bright light from the knob of flesh on top of his head, one of the features of a great man. Also emitted a beam of light from the tuft of white hair between his eyebrows, illuminating the Buddha worlds in the eastern direction, full in number to the sands of 180,000 million ayutas of Ganges. Beyond these numerous worlds was a world called adorned with pure light. Realm there was a Buddha named Pure Flower, constellation, King Wisdom, thus come one worthy of offerings of right and universal knowledge, perfect clarity in conduct, well gone understanding, though unexcelled, worthy trainer of people, teacher of heavenly and human beings. Buddha, world honored one, immeasurably and boundlessly great multitude of bodhisattvas surrounded him and paid reverence, and for these he preached the law. The beam of bright light from the white tuft of Shakyamuni Buddha illuminated the whole land adorned with pure light. There was a bodhisattva named Wonderful Sound, who long ago had planted numerous roots of virtue, offering alms to and waiting upon immeasurable hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, millions of Buddha. He had succeeded in obtaining all kinds of profound wisdom, gaining the samadhi of the wonderful banner mark, the Dharma flower samadhi, the pure virtue samadhi, the samadhi of the constellation kings, for the conditionless samadhi, the seal of wisdom samadhi, the samadhi that allows one to understand the words of all living beings, the samadhi that gathers together all benefit, the pure samadhi, the samadhi of the sport of transcendental powers, the wisdom torch samadhi, the adorned king samadhi, the pure light glow samadhi, the pure storehouse samadhi, the unshared samadhi, and the samadhi of the sun's revolve. He had gained all these great samadhis, equal in number to the sands of 100, 1,000, 10,000, 1,000,000 Ganges, when the emitted by Shakyamuni Buddha illuminated his body. He immediately spoke to the Buddha Flation King Wisdom, saying, world honored one, I must journey to the Saha world to do obeisance, wait on and offer alms to Shakyamuni Buddha, and to see Bodhisattva Manjushri, Prince of the Dharma, Bodhisattva Medicine King, Bodhisattva Brave Donor, Bodhisattva Constellation King Flower, Bodhisattva Superior Practices Intent, Bodhisattva Adorned King, and Bodhisattva Medicine Superior, Bodhisattva Wonderful Sound said to the Buddha, world honored one, my journey now to the Saha world is in Due to the power of the thus come one, a sport carried out by the thus come one's transcendental powers, and adornment to the thus come one's blessings and wisdom thereupon the Bodhisattva, wonderful sound without raising from his seat or swaying his body, entered into the Samadhi, and through the power of the Samadhi, in a place not far removed from the Dharma seat on Mount Gitakuta, created a jeweled mass of 84,000 lotus blossoms. Their stems were Jambudana gold, their leaves were of silver, their stems of diamond, and their calyxes of Kamshuka jewels. At the time the Dharma Prince Manjushri, spying the lotus flower, spoke to the Buddha, saying, World honored one, here Vicious sign, here are many 10,000s of lotus blossoms, their stems made of Jambudana gold, their stamens of diamond, and their calyxes of Kamshuka jewels. At the time the Moni Buddha said to Manjushri, this Bodhisattva and Mahasattva, wonderful sound, wishes to leave the land of the Buddha, pure flower, constellation, king, wisdom, and surrounded by 84,000 bodhisattvas to come to the Saha world for Twedan and pay obeisance to me. He also wishes to offer to Manjushri said to the Buddha, world honored one, what good roots has this Bodhisattva planted? What benefits has he cultivated that he can exercise such great transcendental powers as this? What Samadhi does he carry out? I beg you to explain for us the name of this Samadhi. Two would like to apply ourselves diligently to its practice. If we carry out this Samadhi, then we will be able to observe and size of this Bodhisattva and his bearing and conduct. We beg the world honored one to employ his transcendental powers to bring this Bodhisattva here and enable us to see him. At the time Shakyamuni Buddha said to Manjushri, many treasures thus come, one who entered extinction so long ago will manifest this form. The many treasures said to the Bodhisattva, wonderful sound, come good man, the Dharma Prince Manjushri wishes to see your body. With that Bodhisattva, wonderful sound, vanished from his own land and accompanied by 84,000 bodhisattvas appeared here in the Saha world. The lands that he passed through on his way quaked and trembled in 6 different ways, and in all of them 7 jeweled lotus flowers rained down, and the instruments of hundreds of heavenly musicians sounded of themselves without having been struck. This Bodhisattva's eyes were as big and broad as the leaves of the blue lotus, and 100,000, 10,000 moons put together could not surpass the chin of his face. His body was pure gold in color, adorned with immeasurable hundreds and thousands of blessings. His dignity and virtue were splendid. His light shone brightly. He was endowed with many special marks. The stalwart in body as Narayana, taking his place on the platform made of 7 treasures. He had risen up into the air until he was above the earth, a height of 7 tala trees, and with a host of bodhisattvas surrounding him and paying reverence, he had journeyed to Mount Gitakuta in his Saha world. When he arrived there, he descended 7 treasures bearing a necklace worth hundreds and thousands. He proceeded to the place where Shakyamuni Buddha was, bowed his head to the ground, made obeisance to the Buddha's feet, and presented the necklace, addressing the Buddha these words, world honored one, the Buddha, pure flower, constellation, king, wisdom, wishes to inquire about the world honored one. Are your illnesses few? Are your worries few? Can you come and go easily and conveniently? Can you move about in comfort? Are the 4 elements properly harmonized in you? Can you endure the world's affairs? Are the living beings to rescue? Are they not excessive in their greed, anger, ignorance, jealousy, stinginess, and arrogance? Are they not lacking in filial conduct toward their parents? Are they not disrespectful toward shamanas and give to wrong control their five emotions. World honored one are the living beings able to and overcome the enmity of the devils, has many treasures. Thus come one who entered extinction so long ago, come in his tower of seven treasures to listen to the law. Wishes to inquire about many treasures. Thus come one whether he is tranquil and at ease with few worries, patient and long abiding. World honored one, I would like to see the body of the Buddha. Treasures, I beg the world honored one to allow me to see him at the time. Shakyamuni Buddha said, too many treasures, Buddha. Wonderful sound wishes to see you, then many treasures. Buddha addressed wonderful sound, saying, excellent, excellent, you have come here in order to be able to offer to Shakyamuni Buddha, to listen to the Lotus Sutra and see Manjushri and the others. At the time the Bodhisattva flower virtues. This Bodhisattva wonderful sound what grew benefits has he cultivated, that he possesses these supernatural powers. The Buddha replied to Bodhi's flower virtue. In ages past there was a Buddha named Cloud Thunder Sound King Tathagata Arhat Samyak Sambuddha. His land was called manifesting all worlds, and his kalpa was called gladly seen. For 12,000 years the Bodhisattva wonderful sound employed 100,000 types of musical instruments to offering to the Buddha Cloud Thunder Sound King, and he also presented him 4,000 bowls made of the seven treasures. In recompense for these actions he has now been born in the land of the Buddha, pure flower constellation, King wisdom, and possesses the supernatural power. What is your opinion? The Bodhisattva wonderful sound who musical offerings to the Buddha Cloud Thunder Sound King, and presented him with jeweled vessels. Was he someone unknown to you? In fact, he is none other than the Bodhisattva and Mahasattva wonderful sound who is here now. Flower virtue, this Bodhisattva wonderful sound has already made offerings to and waited on immeasurable number of Buddhas. Long ago he planted the roots of virtue, and in count hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, millions of Nayutas of Buddhas, equal in number to the sounds of the Ganges. Flower virtue, you see only the body of Bodhisattva wonderful sound here, but this Bodhisattva manifests himself in various different bodies and preaches the sutra. Living beings in various different places. At times he appears as King Brahma, at times as Lord Shaka, at times as the heavenly being Freedom, at times as the great general of heaven, at times as the heavenly King Vaishavana, at times as a wheel-turning sage king, at times as one of the petty kings, at times as a rich man, at times as a householder, at times chief minister, at times as a Brahmin, at times as a monk, a nun, a layman believer, or a laywoman believer, at times as the wife of a rich man, a holder, at times as a wife of a chief minister, at times as a wife of a Brahmin, at times as a young boy or a young girl, at times as a heavenly being, a dragon, a yaksha, a gandharva, an asura, a garuda, a kimnara, a mahuraga, a human or an unhuman being. And so preaches the sutra, the hell dwellers, hungry spirits, beasts, and the numerous others who are in difficult circumstances are thus all able to be saved. On sake of those who are in women's quarters of the royal palace, he changes himself into a woman's form and preaches the sutra in the form of a voice hearer. To bring salvation, he manifests himself in the form of a voice hearer and preaches. If the form of a Pratyeka Buddha will bring salvation, he manifests himself in the form of a Pratyeka Buddha and preaches the law. If the form of a Bodhisattva will bring salvation, he manifests a Bodhisattva form and preaches the law. Form of a Buddha will bring salvation, he immediately manifests face the Buddha form and preaches the law. Thus he manifests himself in various different forms depending upon what is appropriate for salvation. If it is appropriate to enter extinction in order to bring salvation, he manifests himself as entering extinction. Flower virtue, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, wonderful sound, has acquired great transcendental power, the power of wisdom that enable him to do all this. At the time the Bodhisattva flower virtue said to the Buddha, world honored one, this Bodhisattva wonderful sound has planted the roots of goodness very deeply. World honored one, what samadhi does this Bodhisattva dwell in, that he is able to carry out all these transformations and manifestations to save living beings? The Buddha said to virtue, good man, this samadhi is calling Sattva, wonderful sound, dwelling in this samadhi is able in this manner to enrich and benefit immeasurable living beings. When the Buddha preached this chapter on Bodhisattva wonderful sound, the 84,000 persons who had come with Bodhisattva wonderful sound all attained the samadhi, enabling them manifest all kinds of bodies, and the immeasurable bodhisattvas in the Saha world also attain the samadhi. And Dharani, chapter 25, the universal gateway of the bodhisattva, perceiver of the world sounds. At the time the bodhisattva exhaustible intent immediately rose from his seat, bared his right shoulder, pressed his palms together, and facing the Buddha spoke these words. World honored one replied with wonderful features, I now ask you once again, for what reason the Buddha's son is named perceiver of the world sounds? Nerd one, endowed which wonderful features? Reply to inexhaustible intent and verse. Listen to the actions of the perceiver of sounds, how aptly he responds in various quarters. His vast oath is deep as the ocean, kalpas past, but it remains unfathomable. He has tended many thousands and millions of Buddhas, setting forth his great pure vow. I will describe him in outline for you. Listen to his name, observe his body, bear him in mind, not passing the time vainly, for he can wipe out the pains of existence. Suppose someone should conceive a wish you should push you into a great pit of fire. Think on the power of the perceiver of sounds, and the pit of fire will change into a pond. If you should be cast adrift on the vast ocean, menaced by dragons, fish, and various demons, think on the power of the perceiver of sounds. Cannot drown you. Suppose you are on the peak of Mount Sumeru and someone pushes you off. Think on the power of that perceiver of sounds, and you will hang in midair like the sun. Suppose you are pursued by evil men who wish to throw you down from a diamond mount. Think on the power of the perceiver of sounds, and they cannot harm a hair of you. Suppose you are surrounded by evil-hearted bandits, each brandishing a knife to wound you. Think on the power of the perceiver of sounds, and at once all will be swayed by compassion. Suppose you encounter trouble with the king's law, face punishment, about to forfeit your life. Think on the power of the perceiver of sounds, and the executioner's sword will be broken to bits. Suppose you are imprisoned in cage and locked, hands and feet bound by fetters. Power of that perceiver of sounds, and they will fall off, leaving you free. Suppose with curses and various poisonous herbs someone should try to injure you. Think on the power of that perceiver of sounds. Injury will rebound upon the originator. Suppose you encounter evil rakshasas, poison dragons, and various demons. Think on the power of the perceiver of sounds, and then none of them will dare to harm. Evil beasts should encircle you, their sharp fangs and claws inspiring terror. Think on the power of the perceiver of sounds, and they will scamper away in boundless retreat of lizards, snakes, vipers, scorpions, threaten you with poison breath that sears like flame. Think on the power perceiver of sounds, and hearing your voice they will flee of themselves. If clouds should bring thunder and lightning strike, if hell pelts or drenching rain comes down, think on the power of that perceiver of sounds, and will vanish away if living beings encounter weariness or peril, immeasurable suffering pressing them down. The power of the perceiver of sounds, wonderful wisdom can save them from the sufferings of the world. He is endowed with transcendental powers. He practices the expedient means of wisdom throughout the lands in the 10 directions. There is no region where he does not manifest himself in many different kinds of evil circumstances in the realms of hell. Hungry spirits, the sufferings of birth, old age, sickness, and death, all these he bit by bit wipes out. He of the true gaze, the pure gaze, the gaze of great and encompassing wisdom, the gaze of pity, the gaze of compassion. Constantly we implore him, constantly look up in reverence. His pure light, free of blemishes, the sun of wisdom, dispelling all darkness. He can quell the wind, fire of misfortune, and everywhere bring light to the world. The precepts from his omniscient body shake us like thunder. The wonder of his sympathetic mind is like a great cloud. He sends down the sweet dew, the Dharma rain to flames of earthly desires. When lawsuits bring you before the officials, when terrified in the midst of an army, think on the power of that perceiver of sounds, and hatred in all its forms will be dispelled. Perceiver of the world sounds, Brahma sounds, the Siddhi sounds, they surpass those sounds of the world. Therefore you should constantly think on them from thought to thought, never entertaining that perceiver of the world sound. And death he can offer aid and support, endowed with all benefits. He views living beings with compassionate eyes. The sea of his accumulated blessings is immeasurable. Therefore you should bow your head to him. At the time the Bodhisattva earth holder immediately rose from his seat, advanced and said to the Buddha, world honored, there are living beings who hear this chapter. And Bodhisattva, perceiver of the world sounds, on the freedom of his actions, his manifestation of a universal gateway, and his transcendental powers, it should be known. Benefits these persons gain are not few. When the Buddha preached this chapter on the universal gateway, a multitude of 84,000 persons in the assembly all conceived the determination to attain the unparalleled state of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Let's go tab 9, page 171. Heart of the Prajna Paramita, the Bodhisattva Avalokita, while living in the deep course of Prajna Paramita, shed light on the 5 skandhas and found them equally empty. After this penetration, he overcame ill-beingness and Shariputra. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is not other than emptiness, emptiness other than form. The same is true with feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Shariputra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They are neither produced nor destroyed, neither defiled nor immaculate. They're increasing nor decreasing. Therefore in emptiness there is neither form nor feelings, no perceptions or mental formation nor consciousness, no eye or ear or nose or tongue or body or mind, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no realms of sense, no interdependent origins, and no extinction of them, no ill-being, no cause of ill-being, no end of ill-being, and no path, no understanding, no attainment, because there is no attainment. The Bodhisattvas grounded Prajna Paramita find no obstacles for their minds. Having no obstacles, they overcome fear, liberating themselves forever from illusion and realizing perfect nirvana. Buddhas in the past, present, and future arrive at Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Therefore one should know that perfect understanding is the highest mantra, the unequal mantra, the destroyer of ill-being, the incorruptible truth, the mantra of Prajna. Therefore be proclaimed Gate Gate Para Samgate Bodhi Swaha Gate Gate Para Samgate Bodhi Swaha Gate Gate Para Samgate Bodhi Swaha. Sentient beings are limitless. I vow to liberate them. Afflictions are endless. I vow to eradicate them. Teachings are infinite. I vow to learn them. Buddhahood is supreme. I vow to attain. I vow that from now until the end of my life and in all future lives until I attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. All realms of existence and their suffering, Namoda, thus come one worthy of offerings, a proper and universal knowledge, perfect in understanding and conduct, skillful in leaving the world through liberation, perfect and complete understanding of all worldly dharma, unsurpassed night-taming hero, teacher of gods and people, Buddha, the world honored one. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Avalokiteshvara, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Namo Mahasamaprapta Bodhisattva, Namo Mahasamaprapta Bodhisattva, Namo Mahasamaprapta Bodhisattva, Namo Shittigarbha Bodhisattva, Namo Shittigarbha Bodhisattva, Namo Shittigarbha Bodhisattva, Namo Manjushri Bodhisattva, Namo Manjushri Bodhisattva, Namo Manjushri Bodhisattva, Namo Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, Namo Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, Namo Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, Namo Maitreya Bodhisattva, Namo Maitreya Bodhisattva, Namo Maitreya Bodhisattva, Namo Great Pure Sea like Bodhisattvas, Namo Great Pure Sea like Bodhisattvas, Namo Great Pure Sea like Bodhisattvas, Namo Deva guarding Bodhisattvas, Namo Deva guarding Bodhisattvas, Namo Deva guarding Bodhisattvas. I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and of love. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community that lives in harmony and awareness. Dwelling in the refuge of Buddha, I clearly see the path of light and beauty in the dwelling in the refuge of Dharma. I learn to open many doors on the path of transformation, dwelling in the refuge of Sun. Shining light thus supports me, keeping my practice free of obstruction. Taking refuge in the Buddha in my myself, I aspire to help all people recognize their own awakened nature, realizing the mind of love, taking refuge in the Dharma. In myself I aspire to help all people fully master the ways of practice and walk together on the path of liberation, taking refuge in the Sangha. In myself I aspire to help all people build fourfold community, to embrace all beings and support their transformation. Reciting the sutras, practicing the way of awareness, gives rise to benefits without limit. We vow to share the fruits with all beings. We vow to offer tribute to parents, teachers, friends, and numerous beings who give guidance and support along